Folks, if you like this video, please give it the thumbs up and comment below with your thoughts. And please share this video by clicking on the icon. And please hit the little bell to be notified whenever I release a video. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this channel, as many more videos on prepping and self-defense in the courts are coming. Folks, today's video may not sound much like a prepping topic, but what I have found is that many preppers are self-reliant, and they also want as much control over their destinies as possible. So I think this subject will be of great interest to many preppers. But as a police officer, I get asked this question quite a bit by people that I come across while I'm on duty. The person will say something along the lines of, hey, last week I got arrested for insert crime here, and the cop didn't read me my rights when he arrested me. So since the cop didn't read me my rights, the charges against me are going to automatically get dropped, right? And then my answer to them is, well, maybe, but probably not. So let's take a quick look at the Miranda warning, aka the advice of rights, before we go any further. Even if you're not familiar with the term Miranda rights, you basically know what they are. We've all heard them on TV. You have the right to remain silent. Anything that you say can be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney, etc. So the Miranda rights comes from the court case Miranda versus Arizona, which I think happened in 1966, I believe. But a Mr. Ernesto Miranda was being held in question for the rape and the murder of a mentally challenged victim. And when they were questioning him, they did not inform him that he had the right to remain silent, which is afforded to us underneath the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution. So during this questioning, Mr. Ernesto Miranda ended up admitting to the crime, and he was given a lengthy prison sentence. And then he ended up appealing the conviction because he was not given his advice of rights. And then in his appeal, the Supreme Court ended up throwing out his conviction, again because he was not given his rights by the police before they questioned him. So after the Supreme Court threw out his conviction, then a person's right to remain silent and not talk to the police became known as the Miranda rights after that. Now here's some curious side notes to the whole Miranda story. After his conviction was thrown out, he was later recharged and actually convicted during a second trial. And during the second trial, the prosecution used different witnesses and introduced new evidence the second time. And then since that Supreme Court decision, most officers now carry a Miranda rights card in their uniform pocket, which they directly read from when they give a suspect his rights. So a popular thing for cops to do in the 1970s, once Mr. Miranda was paroled, a popular thing for cops to do was to have him actually sign their Miranda card that they carried in their uniform. And then later in his life, Mr. Miranda ended up actually being stabbed to death. And then the irony of it all is that when the cops questioned the suspect, he invoked his Miranda rights. And then for whatever reason, the cops didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. So without a confession, they were actually forced to release Mr. Miranda's murderer. But anyways, back to the point of this video. The Supreme Court ruled that if somebody is in police custody, and if the police are asking them questions about the crime, then the police must give that person their Miranda rights. And the easy way to remember if somebody is supposed to be Mirandaized is custody and questioning. And it's actually not just questioning, but incriminating questioning. When I arrest somebody, I can ask them all day long about what they think about the weather or what they thought about the Super Bowl. And I don't have to Mirandize them because those types of questions are not incriminating. But the second that I ask an arrested person, hey, where were you when the crime was committed? Or, hey, did you commit that crime? Etc. Then I have to give them Miranda rights because those type of questions are incriminating. And then the other issue is defining exactly what custody is. Again, Miranda says if you have custody and questioning, then the cops have to give you your Miranda rights. So again, we have to define what custody actually is. Now in my state, which is a fairly conservative state, my state basically defines custody as when a person feels like that they are not free to leave. I think the Supreme Court originally meant custody as when a person is told that they're not free to leave or when they're in handcuffs or something like that. But my state has taken it a step further and says that custody happens when a person simply feels like that they're not free to walk away from the police officer. Now here's an example where many times cops will not read the Miranda rights to suspects. Let's give an example of when a cop sees and witnesses a drunk that's trying to fight people in public. The cop will arrest that disorderly drunk and never ask him any questions or read him his Miranda rights. The cop doesn't need to question the disorderly drunk because the cop witnessed it all and doesn't need to ask any questions. And even though that disorderly drunk is in custody, no Miranda has to be given since no incriminating questioning took place. Now, to get around having to give Miranda to a suspect, sometimes cops will tell somebody prior to questioning them, the cops will tell the suspect that they're free to leave. Once the cop tells them that they're free to leave, then the custody part is gone. And again, Miranda requires custody and incriminating questions. So once a cop tells a suspect that he's actually free to leave, then the cop can ask all the incriminating questions he wants at that point. And the courts have ruled that once a person is told that they're free to leave, that if they choose to hang around and answer questions at that point, then that's on them. Now, it's hard for me to honestly tell someone if they should talk to the cops if they're being questioned. One thing I've learned is you never want to say never. And I'm saying this because eventually somebody's going to comment below with, "Never talk to the cops." Just to give an example, I had one case where a female accused a guy of forcibly pinning her down and raping her. So when I brought him in for questioning, he initially almost lawyered up and didn't talk to me. But then he decided to go ahead and talk to me, and then when he did, he ended up giving me information that showed that no rape actually happened and that she made a false accusation against him. So the whole point of this little story is that if he had stuck with the decision not to answer my questions, then I only would have had one side of the story to go with, which was her side of the story that he pinned her down and forcibly raped her. So I would have arrested him. And then he would have been booked into the jail and held for days, possibly until he got bonded out. But since he decided to talk to me, I got information that showed it was a false accusation. And instead of getting booked into jail, he went home. Now, a quick side note on that story, she did end up admitting that she made a false accusation against him, and he decided not to file charges against her for false reporting. But again, deciding if you'll talk to law enforcement or not can be a tricky decision. But one simple fact is this: the majority of people who watch my channel, they would never be questioned by the cops to begin with. It's rare for truly innocent people to get questioned by the police again to begin with. Unless a totally false accusation is made, people who have a tendency to get questioned by police are people who live a questionable lifestyle to begin with. When they're out doing questionable things and being in questionable places, that makes them a suspect to begin with. If for some reason I were to get called into a police station and I was told that I was suspected of robbing a store last night, I would definitely talk to the cops, because I would want them to know up front that I was at home and give ways to prove that I was at home and not out robbing some store. Now, my personal thoughts are, if somebody has committed robbery or rape or fraud or some other kind of a crime against another person, then they just need to man up and admit to their crime and accept the consequences. But in the end, you have to make up your mind if you will talk to the cops or not. And it's going to be very dependent on the situation surrounding the accusation against you or what you're suspected of. There's going to be times, especially if you're totally innocent, that talking to the cops would benefit you. And then there will be times where talking to the cops would be the last thing that you'd want to do. Like if I were in a self-defense shooting, whether I'm on or off duty, but as directed by my police union, I'd only give a very brief statement of something close to, "I was in fear for my life, so I protected myself." And then any further statements would only be given after I had 2 nights of sleep and then given with my lawyer next to me. However, if you ask any defense attorney if you should talk to the cops or not, he's almost always going to tell you absolutely not. First off, he's going to probably assume that there's a very high likelihood that you're actually guilty of what you're being accused of. And it's never smart for an actual guilty person to talk to the police. Secondly, he's probably not going to care if you're arrested or not. One of the ways that he makes money is by representing you in court, and court doesn't happen unless you've been arrested or charged with a crime. So again, deciding if you will talk to the cops or not is a decision that you'll have to make on your own and will be very dependent on the situation. So folks, I hope you found this video information and useful. And if you made it this far, hey, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.